She fainted from exhaustion, until the Mafia boss found a milk receipt and saw the truth. The marketplace of Eldrin was alive with chaos. Merchants shouted, children ran between stalls, and the scent of roasted chestnuts mixed with the sharp tang of iron from the city gates. But amidst all the movement, one figure moved differently, quietly, almost as if she were a shadow among the throng.
Lady Seraphine, with her delicate hands clutching the hem of her dark velvet gown, wove through the crowd, her pale face set in a mask of composure.
No one noticed the subtle tremor in her steps, the way her hand pressed against her chest, as if to steady a beating heart that seemed too heavy for her small body. Patience. To smile at nobles who might wish her harm, but the truth was far simpler. She was tired, deeply, utterly, crushingly tired. The curse had begun slowly. At first, it was fatigue that lingered at the edges of her limbs. Then shadows seemed to curl in her vision at night, whispering doubts and fears she had never known. And now, on the sunless streets of Eldrin, the exhaustion had become unbearable. Her legs faltered beneath her, and she sank to the cold cobblestones without a sound. The crowd gasped. Some rushed to help, others turned away, afraid of the pale, almost ghostly woman who had collapsed so suddenly. Seraphine's eyes fluttered closed, and for a moment she allowed herself to sink into the abyss of unconsciousness. From the shadows of the marketplace a figure watched. Lord Kale, known across Eldrin as the Shadow Duke, moved with quiet certainty toward the fallen noblewoman. Inspiration. Whispers followed him wherever he went. A man of terrible influence, controlling the Undercity and feared by even the bravest warriors. Yet now he knelt beside Seraphine, his sharp gaze examining her pale features with an intensity that sent shivers through her unconscious body. Something about her drew him in. Not her beauty, which was undeniable, but the faint tremor of hidden strength beneath her fragile form. Kale reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and noticed a small folded paper tucked in the glove she had been wearing.
A milk receipt, simple and ordinary, yet it seemed out of place on a woman of her standing. Kale's brows narrowed.
The small, mundane object hinted at something deeper, a secret she carried like a hidden flame. He pocketed it, slipping it into the folds of his dark coat, and lifted her with surprising ease. She was lighter than she looked, almost as if the weight of her life had been hidden within her exhaustion. He carried her to the Shadow Hall, the great stone house he commanded at the edge of the city. The halls were dimly lit, shadows stretching along the walls, and the air smelled of incense and smoke. Servants had long since learned not to question Kale's choices, and none dared speak as he laid Seraphine upon a bed lined with soft, dark linens. When she stirred, her eyes fluttered open, revealing the faintest hint of confusion and fear. Kale's presence was overwhelming. He was a man who exuded control, and yet here, he was gentle, almost impossibly careful with her frail body. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You are safe," Kale replied, his tone smooth but firm. "For now." Seraphine's gaze flicked toward him, searching for any trace of malice. But she found none. But even as relief washed over her, a knot of wariness formed in her chest. Praise. People like him were dangerous. And yet there was something in his eyes, something that promised understanding, though she could not name it. Kale watched her carefully as she recovered. Every small movement, every faint gasp of breath, told him more than words ever could. She was not merely a noblewoman in distress. She was a woman carrying secrets, hidden burdens, and perhaps even power she had yet to understand. Hours passed. Seraphine lay in silence, staring at the carved ceiling above, her mind racing. She thought of the market, the collapse, and the strange sensation that had overtaken her in the moment of her fainting. Something dark lingered within her, a shadow that seemed to drain her very life. She had been hiding it for years, even from herself, but now it had made itself known in the most public of ways. Cale remained in the room, a silent guardian. He did not speak, but his presence was heavy, almost suffocating in its intensity. Breath. Finally, unable to resist, Seraphine broke the silence. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice small yet edged with a strength that surprised even her. Pale's gaze softened for a brief moment. "Because I am curious," he said, simply. "Curious about what brings a woman of your poise to the edge of collapse in a city such as this, and perhaps because I do not allow weakness to go unnoticed."
Seraphine frowned, uncertain whether to be offended or grateful.
Breath. She did not know him, yet he seemed to see her in a way no one ever had. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could understand the weight she carried. The night deepened, and Cale produced a simple bowl of warm milk. Seraphine accepted it with hesitant hands, sipping carefully. It was ordinary, yet comforting. And in the folds of the paper she had carried, now tucked away in Cale's coat, lay a secret that even she did not fully understand. Morning light broke across the shadow hall, filtering through tall, narrow windows. Seraphine rose from the bed, her body still weak but her resolve firming with each step. Psst. She did not know why, but she trusted Cale enough to follow his instructions, though her heart beat fast with unease. Cale led her to a balcony overlooking the city. From here, the expanse of Eldrin was both beautiful and cruel, the streets twisting like veins across the kingdom. Cale's gaze followed hers, his expression unreadable. "You have enemies," he said, his voice low. "And not all of them are ordinary men or women. Some are, but far older, far darker. You are more in danger than you realize." Seraphine's heart tightened. She had always known that the court was dangerous, that politics could be lethal. But she had never imagined the reach of darkness extended beyond human ambition into something more supernatural, more insidious. I do not understand," she admitted, her fingers curling around the railing. "Why me?" Cale stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Because you are important, and because the shadows that follow you are not just threats. They are tied to your very blood! Your very soul!" The words sent a shiver down her spine. Breast. She wanted to ask more, but the fear of what she might learn kept her silent. Cale's hand remained steady, a pillar of strength in a world that had always demanded she carry her burdens alone. Later, in the quiet of the study, Cale examined the milk receipt once more. It was mundane, yet the ink seemed to shimmer strangely in the candlelight, as if it were more than it appeared. He did not tell Seraphine that the receipt was a clue, a marker of her hidden acts, a piece of evidence that someone had been watching her kindness. Someone had noticed the small rebellion she carried quietly in her life, helping the poor and the starving, defying the cruelty of the court in small, invisible ways. Cale felt a strange sense of respect and perhaps even admiration. Here was a woman who could hide both her strength and her vulnerability, whose life had been a careful balance between survival and defiance. And now she had fallen into his hands, whether by chance or fate. But as night fell once more, Seraphine stood at the window, staring at the dimly lit streets. She felt exhaustion clinging to her bones, but also a strange warmth of safety. For the first time in years, she did not feel entirely alone, and yet a small knot of fear lingered in her heart. The milk receipt lay hidden in Cale's coat, a silent witness to secrets yet untold. mysteries yet unresolved. And somewhere in the twisting streets of Eldrin, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the right moment to strike, to exploit weakness, to unravel everything Seraphine held dear. Seraphine closed her eyes, letting the wind from the balcony brush her face. Break. She did not know what the future held, only that she was no longer entirely defenseless. And in the shadows, Cale watched over her, his mind filled with questions he did not yet have the answers to, and a curiosity that would not allow him to leave her fate to chance. And then, a faint sound drifted from the alley below, a whisper, almost lost to the night. Seraphine stiffened, her pulse quickening. Cale's eyes narrowed. Someone was coming. Someone who knew more than they should. The game had begun. The next morning, Eldrin was cloaked in mist, soft and pale, like the breath of the city itself. Lady Seraphine stood by the balcony of the Shadow Hall, her fingers curling around the cold stone railing. She had slept little, the shadows in her dreams whispering her father's name and the words she did not fully understand. Cale appeared silently behind her, his long coat brushing the floor. The faint scent of smoke and candle wax followed him, a smell that Seraphine had begun to associate with both danger and safety. "You cannot remain here forever," Cale said, his voice low, almost reluctant. "The city is not forgiving, and neither are your enemies." Seraphine turned, her eyes wary. "I am no stranger to danger," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "I have spent years surviving in courts filled with men who would see me destroyed for a word, a gesture, a glance. A glance way down her face as if he could see her entire history written in her pale skin. And yet you collapsed in the market," he said finally, a hint of something unreadable in his voice. "Exhaustion, yes, but something else." She did not want to admit the truth. Not yet. I do not know what you mean." Instead, he offered her a simple breakfast: bread, cheese, and a small jug of warm milk. The milk, ordinary as it seemed, carried the same comfort it had the night before. Seraphine hesitated, but drank, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the cup. Cale's eyes lingered on her, silently assessing, protective yet distant, like a shadow too large to ignore. Hours passed. Seraphine attempted to move freely through the hall, but every step reminded her of her weakness, the faint pulse of magic that throbbed within her like a heartbeat. Cale noticed her falter and reached out, steadying her with an arm around her waist. Their eyes met for a brief, almost electric moment, and Seraphine looked away, her heart racing. "I need to understand this curse," Cale said, finally breaking the silence. "Whatever afflicts you, it is not ordinary. It is tied to your bloodline, your family, and perhaps to forces older than this city itself." Seraphine's lips parted, unsure whether to respond. She had always hidden the truth, even from herself. The whispers, the shadows, the exhaustion. They were more than mere fatigue. They were a chain she could not see but felt in every fiber of her being. And now someone else had seen it, felt it, and she could not ignore the strange comfort that came with Cale's knowledge. "Why help me?" she asked again, quieter this time, breath. Others would not care.
Cale did not smile. "Because you are not ordinary," he said simply.
"And because I do not ignore weakness when it hides strength. You hide strength, Lady Seraphine, whether you know it or not. But there are people who would use it against you." Seraphine's stomach tightened. The thought of enemies hunting her, of secrets being twisted into weapons, made her pulse quicken. She had long believed herself capable of handling anything, yet Cale's words stirred a fear she could not fully name. "Then I suppose I must show you something," Cale continued. He led her to a room filled with shelves of books, scrolls, and artifacts. Dust covered some, while others gleamed faintly in the pale morning light. Cale pulled out a small, leather-bound volume and opened it carefully. "This," he said, pointing to the page, "contains accounts of curses, ancient and dangerous, that have lingered across generations in this city. I believe yours is among them." Duh. Seraphine leaned closer, scanning the words. Some were unfamiliar, written in the sharp script of old magic. Her pulse quickened. She felt the faint echo of her father's voice in her mind, warning her of danger and betrayal. She had lived with the curse quietly, never speaking of it, never showing her true weakness, and yet here it was, undeniable. Cale watched her closely, noting the flicker of recognition in her eyes. "It is not merely a curse of fatigue," he said, "but one that feeds on fear and exhaustion, grows stronger when hidden, and can destroy those who ignore it." Seraphine's hands trembled. "Then, how do I fight it?" Cale's eyes softened slightly. "You cannot fight it alone. It will take trust, and it will take courage. You must allow someone else to help bear the weight." She wanted to resist, to stand alone as she had for years, but the fear and the trust mingled together in a strange, almost painful way. For the first time, she felt the possibility of partnership rather than isolation, and that possibility frightened her. The rest of the day passed in quiet study. Cale taught her small ways to observe her own energy, to notice the shadows that clung to her. He showed her how to move deliberately, to let strength flow from awareness rather than force. And slowly, Seraphine began to feel something she had not felt in years: control. But the city outside did not rest. Whispers reached Cale through unseen channels, shadows that moved faster than eyes could follow. Someone had noticed the same milk receipt he had found. Someone knew more about Seraphine's secret than she realized. But as evening fell, Cale led her to a balcony once more. The sky was dark, dotted with the pale light of distant stars. Seraphine leaned against the railing, feeling the cool stone beneath her fingers, trying to calm her racing thoughts. "Someone is watching you," Cale said quietly. "I do not know who yet, but I will find out, and I will protect you." Seraphine turned to him, the weight of gratitude and fear mingling in her chest. I do not know if I can trust anyone," she admitted. "Not even you."
Kyle's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly.
"Trust is not given lightly," he said. "It is earned. Bration. And right now it is the only thing that may save you." A sound drifted from the alley below, a soft, deliberate echo, like footsteps on cobblestone. Seraphine stiffened, but Cale's eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. "You see?" he said, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "They are already here." Her pulse quickened. The fear she had buried for so long surged forward. She wanted to flee, to hide, to deny the darkness, but Cale's presence anchored her. Somehow, she knew she would not face this alone. Break. Night deepened, and the first signs of danger appeared. A figure moved through the misty streets. Silent and deliberate, they paused at the edge of the marketplace where Seraphine had collapsed days before, and then disappeared into the darkness again. Seraphine watched the shadows with wide eyes, feeling the thrum of magic in her blood, the latent power that had been sleeping within her. Cale remained close, his presence both a shield and a challenge. "You have strength," he said, "even if you do not yet know it. But you must learn quickly. They will not wait for you to be ready." Hours later, Cale and Seraphine returned to the study. The leather-bound book lay open between them, filled with old spells, accounts of curses, and faint, intricate symbols. Kale pointed to one section, tracing the ink with a careful finger. This describes a curse that drains life from its host until they collapse, he explained. It feeds on exhaustion and fear, grows stronger when hidden, and can only be weakened through courage, awareness, and connection. You have been hiding it, Lady Seraphine, and that has made it stronger. Seraphine felt a shiver run through her. Then, how do I survive? You learn to face it, Kale said simply. You allow yourself to be seen. You allow yourself to trust. And perhaps you allow someone else to carry part of your burden. The words struck her with both hope and fear. She had spent years alone, guarding herself against enemies and shadows alike. To let someone in, especially someone as dangerous as Kale, was terrifying. But at the same time, it was the first step toward freedom. They spent the night in quiet study, Kale guiding her through exercises that taught her to notice the shadows, to sense the magic in her own veins, to feel the pulse of life even in exhaustion. Breath. Slowly, she began to feel the first flickers of strength returning, though faint and fragile. As dawn approached, Seraphine felt the weight of the city, the shadows and the curse pressing on her once more.
Break. She looked at Kale, feeling a strange mix of gratitude, fear, and longing. I
do not know if I can face this, she admitted softly. Hayal's eyes softened, his hand brushing against hers in an unspoken promise. You are not alone, he said. And whatever comes, I will face it with you. A whisper almost too soft to hear. Bration. Seraphine froze, her heart racing. Kale's eyes narrowed, and he stepped toward the door. They are close, he said quietly, and I do not yet know who they are. Seraphine swallowed hard, feeling the thrill of fear and anticipation mingle in her chest. The shadows were moving, the game was beginning, and she realized that her life, and perhaps her heart, was about to change forever. The night outside deepened and the city waited, silent and watchful. Somewhere in the twisting alleys, unseen eyes followed them, and the first threads of a larger mystery began to weave themselves into the lives of Lady Seraphine and Lord Kale. The hunt had begun. The city of Eldrin had a way of hiding its dangers in plain sight. The streets, cloaked in mist and shadow, twisted like veins through stone buildings, and the faint glow of lanterns barely pierced the night. Lady Seraphine and Lord Kale moved silently through an alley near the market, their breaths forming clouds in the cold air. The events of the previous night had made one thing clear. Someone was watching, and they were closer than ever. Seraphine's hands were clenched tightly around the folds of her cloak. Though she had learned a little control over the curse that drained her, its presence was constant, like a shadow brushing against her soul. Every footstep, every flicker of movement in the darkness made her heart race. Kyle, walking beside her, exuded a calm she could not match. His eyes scanned the alleys, sharp and alert, and his hand rested near the hilt of a dagger she knew he would not hesitate to use. Yet there was something else in his presence, something that grounded her. Even in the shadows, even facing enemies she could not yet see, she felt a small, dangerous comfort in his proximity. "Stay close," Kale whispered, his voice a low rumble. "Pray, do not let the shadows tempt your fear. They feed on it." Seraphine nodded, trying to steady her racing heart. She had learned the first lesson well. Fear made the curse stronger. But she had also learned the second. She could face it with guidance, with someone who understood, even if she did not yet fully trust them. They reached a quiet courtyard, one that KL often used as a temporary refuge. The walls were high and dark, vines curling along the stones like living shadows. KL motioned for her to sit while he inspected the area. Even in the silence, the tension was palpable. Every creak of wood, every distant whisper of wind sounded like a threat. "You are improving," Kale said finally, his eyes still scanning the perimeter. "The curse is still strong, but you are beginning to sense it, to feel it, to control the edges. That is progress." Breaths pressed together. "It feels vibration," she admitted.
"Like it wants me to fail, to collapse, to give in to the exhaustion." Kale's gaze softened slightly.
"Yes," he said. "It wants you to hide your strength because it grows stronger when you do. But you have begun to fight it. That is why they are interested in you. Not because you are weak, but because you are powerful." The words made her pause. Powerful. She had never thought of herself as powerful. Forsoaking. She had spent so long hiding, surviving, pretending that the idea of strength felt almost foreign. And yet, as she looked at Kale, she felt the truth in his words. Perhaps she had power. Perhaps she could learn to wield it. A sudden noise broke the moment. A soft, deliberate rustle of footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Seraphine's eyes widened, and Kale's hand shot out to steady her.
"They are here,"
he said quietly, moving to the shadows.
From the mist emerged a figure cloaked in black.
The movement was deliberate, confident, almost predatory. Seraphine's pulse quickened. Kale stepped forward, his presence like a shield, and for the first time she felt the full weight of his power beside her. "Who are you?" Kale demanded, his voice low and commanding. The figure paused, then lowered their hood. Seraphine caught a glimpse of a young man's face, pale and sharp-featured, his eyes dark with a strange intensity. There was no immediate threat in his stance, yet every movement suggested hidden skill, hidden danger. "I mean no harm," the man said. "But she is in danger. You do not understand what you face." Kale's gaze narrowed.
"Explain quickly. I do not tolerate riddles." The man glanced at Seraphine, then back at KL.
"The curse, it is older than you think. It was placed not just on her, but on her family line. There are those who would see it consume her, to gain power from the shadows it produces. You cannot protect her alone." Seraphine's heart raced. The curse was stronger, older, more dangerous than she had imagined. And yet she felt a strange surge of determination.
For the first time, the fear that had dominated her life seemed paired with purpose.
Suspicion etched into his features. "And why should I trust you?" "Because I have seen what it does," the man replied, his voice steady, "and I know how to help her survive." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Seraphine could feel the tension, the unspoken questions, the weight of power in the air. She did not know if she could trust either man fully, but she realized that to survive, she had to act. Kale finally nodded, though his eyes did not lose their sharpness. "Very well, but know this. She is under my protection. No harm will come to her while I stand." The man inclined his head slightly. "I do not doubt that," he said, "but the curse is cunning. It will find cracks in your vigilance, weaknesses in your strength. You must learn to work together, or she will fall."
Seraphine felt the words like a challenge, almost like a spark igniting within her.
She had spent years hiding, surviving alone, and now she was being told she could fight back, not alone, but with guidance, with trust. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Kale led Seraphine to a hidden chamber beneath the Shadow Hall, a place few knew existed. The walls were lined with ancient runes, faintly glowing in the dim light, and the air thrummed with a subtle magical energy. Here, the lessons would begin in earnest. "You must focus," Kale said, his hands guiding hers over the faint symbols etched into the stone floor. "Breath. The curse feeds on fear and hesitation. You will learn to feel it, to understand it, to control it. Breath. And I will be here." Seraphine knelt on the floor, her breath steadying as she let her senses reach out into the shadows within her. At first, the magic felt overwhelming, like waves crashing against a fragile shore. But Kale's presence was constant, grounding, and slowly she began to sense the pulse of the curse, its rhythm, its hunger, and its weakness, broken only by Kale's quiet instructions. Seraphine's body shook, exhausted from the effort, but she pressed on. For the first time, she felt that she was not merely a victim of the curse. She could fight it. She could survive. By nightfall, her movements were steadier, her focus sharper. She felt a connection to the shadows around her, a strange balance forming between fear and control. Kale's eyes reflected a quiet approval, and for a fleeting moment, Seraphine allowed herself to feel pride. But the peace was short-lived. A sudden chill filled the chamber, and the faint glow of the runes flickered. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, curling and twisting as if alive. Seraphine froze, sensing something she had not felt before. A presence older, stronger, and far more dangerous than she could yet comprehend.
Kale's eyes darkened.
"They have found us," he said quietly, placing himself in front of her. "Prepare yourself. This will test everything you have learned." The shadows shifted, forming shapes that danced and flickered at the edges of her vision. Seraphine's pulse raced, fear and determination mingling in a fierce, combustible mix. She could feel the curse within her, pulsing in response to the threat, urging her to collapse, to give in, to let the darkness win. But she did not. Not entirely. Kale's hand found hers, a firm, grounding grip, and the contact sent a surge of courage through her veins. Together they faced the encroaching darkness, a silent agreement forming between them. She would not run. She would not hide. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could survive this nightmare. The figure from the alley reappeared, stepping from the shadows into the chamber. The young man's eyes glowed faintly with a strange, ethereal light.
"It is stronger than I anticipated," he said, his voice steady but tense.
"You must embrace it fully, or it will consume you." Seraphine's breath caught. Embrace the curse. She had spent years fearing it, running from it, hiding from it. Could she truly face it, control it, and use it instead of letting it destroy her? Breath. Kale's gaze met hers, fierce and unwavering.
"You can," he said quietly.
Brett.
"I will not let you fall, but you must take the first step."
The shadows surged, pressing against her senses, and Seraphine felt the full weight of the curse for the first time. It was cold, hungry, relentless. She could feel it gnawing at her strength, testing her limits, whispering doubts and fears. And then she made a choice. She reached out, mentally, spiritually, allowing herself to feel the pulse of the curse, to sense its rhythm, its hunger, and its weakness. She did not fight it blindly. She did not try to destroy it. She embraced it, acknowledged it, and let it flow through her without surrendering to it. The effect was immediate. The shadows recoiled slightly, writhing as if surprised by her sudden strength. Cale's eyes widened in silent approval, and the young man nodded, faintly smiling.
"You are stronger than I imagined," he said.
But this is only the beginning. The true test is yet to come. Seraphine felt a thrill of fear and triumph.
Breath. She had faced the curse, taken the first step toward mastery, and survived. But the city was still dangerous. Enemies still lurked in the shadows, and the curse was far from gone. Cale stepped closer, his hand brushing hers again.
"You have done well," he said softly.
Remember this. Strength alone is not enough. Trust, courage, and heart will guide you through what comes next. The shadows in the chamber shifted once more, and Seraphine felt the pulse of danger that had been following her since her collapse in the marketplace. Somewhere, in the twisting alleys of Eldrin, unseen eyes watched, plotting, waiting. The real test of her strength and her heart was only just beginning. The wind howled through the streets of Eldrin as night fell, carrying a chill that felt older than the city itself. Lady Seraphine and Lord Cale stood at the top of the Shadow Hall, looking down over the twisting alleys where danger waited like a predator. Seraphine's pulse was steady now. Her earlier training, the lessons in the hidden chamber, had given her a control she had never known. But control did not erase fear. The curse still pulsed within her, a shadow she had learned to dance with rather than flee from. She could feel it now, coiled and eager, whispering possibilities and dangers in her mind. Bah! And somewhere in the distance, she sensed the enemies who had been hunting her for days, drawn to the power that she was learning to command. Cale stood close, his presence a steadying force. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low but unwavering. "This will be the final test." Seraphine nodded. "I am ready. I will not let it destroy me. I will not let them destroy me." Her hands clenched, her fingers brushing against the faint glow of magic that lingered in her veins. She was no longer the weak, collapsing woman who had been found in the market. She had grown stronger, and the strength was born not just of magic, but of courage, of trust, of connection. The shadows shifted in the streets below, moving with deliberate intent. Figures emerged, cloaked shapes that whispered power and menace. Cale stepped forward, drawing his dagger, its edge glinting faintly in the moonlight. The enemies paused, as if sensing the pulse of power emanating from Seraphine. Breath. "You should have stayed hidden," Cale said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "But now you will face what you sought to avoid." The leader of the cloaked figures stepped forward, revealing a pale face with sharp eyes that reflected malice and ambition. "The curse belongs to us," the figure hissed. "Your power is nothing." Inspiration. "Hand her over, Cale, or face destruction." She had spent years hiding, fearing what the curse might do, fearing what the world might do to her. Now she would stand. She would fight. And she would not fight alone. Cale moved to her side, his hand brushing hers. "Remember," he whispered, "feel it, do not fear it. The curse is part of you, not your enemy." She nodded, closing her eyes briefly. She reached inward, feeling the pulse of magic in her veins, the shadows that had haunted her, the whispers that had plagued her dreams. And instead of recoiling, she let them flow through her, bending them, shaping them, controlling them. The effect was immediate. The shadows surrounding their enemies flickered and wavered, almost as if confused by her sudden command. Seraphine opened her eyes, and they glowed faintly with a pale ethereal light. Cale's gaze softened, his hand brushing hers again. "Do not stop now. he urged. The cloaked figures attacked, moving with speed and precision. Parrying, dodging, and striking with calculated force, Seraphine moved beside him, weaving the magic of the curse into every motion. It was no longer a threat, no longer something that drained her. It was part of her, an extension of her will. With a surge of power, Seraphine extended her control. The shadows twisted around the attackers, binding them without harm. Their movements slowed, their intent thwarted by a force they could not comprehend. For the first time, she felt the thrill of true mastery, the exhilaration of turning fear into power. The leader of the cloaked figures stepped back, astonished, realizing that the woman he had underestimated was far stronger than he had imagined. He hissed, retreating into the shadows. "This is not over," he said, his voice a promise and a threat. "You have won a battle, not the war." Seraphine's chest heaved, the pulse of power fading to a calm rhythm. She looked at Cale, her eyes reflecting awe, relief, and something deeper, a bond forged in shadows and fire. Cale approached her, his expression softening. "You did it," he said quietly. "You faced it, controlled it, and survived. I am proud of you." Seraphine's lips curved in a small, exhausted smile. "I could not have done it alone," she admitted. Her hand found his, fingers entwining naturally. For the first time, she did not fear the closeness, did not fear the trust she had placed in another. Cale's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability showing through his usual sharpness. "No," he agreed. "We faced it together." The city below seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if Eldrin itself recognized the shift in power. The shadows that had been thick and oppressive now seemed lighter, as though acknowledging Seraphine's strength. Hours later, in the quiet of the Shadow Hall, Cale and Seraphine sat together, the weight of the night pressing upon them but mingled with relief. Breath. Seraphine traced her fingers along the runes that had once intimidated her, now symbols of her triumph. "You have changed," Ale said softly. "You are no longer the same woman who collapsed in the market." Seraphine nodded. "Neither are you," she replied. "You taught me to face my fear, to trust, to fight, and to survive. I never thought I could feel strength like this." Kael's gaze lingered on her, intense and steady. "Strength is not just magic or power," he said. "It is courage, heart, and the willingness to let others in." "You have learned that now." A soft silence fell between them, filled with unspoken words, with gratitude, with longing that neither fully acknowledged. Breath. Seraphine felt the warmth of trust, the quiet thrill of connection, and the knowledge that she was no longer alone. Days passed in relative peace. Seraphine continued to train, refining her control over the curse, learning to sense the faintest disturbances in the city's magic. Cale remained close, always near, offering guidance, protection, and sometimes quiet companionship. Their bond deepened in subtle ways. Shared glances, brushes of hands, the unspoken comfort of presence. The city lights shimmered below like scattered jewels. The air was calm, almost serene, and Seraphine felt the weight of recent nights begin to lift. "You have come far," Cale said softly, his hand brushing hers. "But the city will always hold shadows." "You must remain vigilant." Seraphine nodded, but her gaze met his. "I know, but I also know I can face them now." "With you!" Cale's lips curved in a faint smile.
"Together," he agreed. The milk receipt, the small, seemingly insignificant object that had first drawn Cale's curiosity, lay folded in her hand.
It had been a reminder of her compassion, her quiet acts of rebellion against cruelty and injustice. Now, it was a symbol of her strength, proof that even the smallest gestures could have meaning in a world filled with darkness. And as she held it, Seraphine understood something important. Survival was not just about magic or power. It was about courage, heart, and connection. She had faced fear and exhaustion, mastered the curse, and learned to trust. She had grown, transformed, and finally, she felt free. The night was silent except for the whisper of wind. Somewhere in the distance, shadows still lingered, watching, waiting. But Seraphine no longer feared them. She had faced the darkness, controlled it, and survived. Kale stepped closer, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to fade. "You are remarkable," he said quietly, "but not just for what you can do, but for who you are."
Seraphine looked at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude, relief, and something deeper. "And you?"
"Who are you when you are not the Shadow Duke, when you are just you?" Kale's gaze softened, and he took her hand in his. "I am someone who has learned that strength is more than power. It is trust, heart, and courage. And proud to stand beside you." A faint smile touched Seraphine's lips. "Then we are equal," she said, "in strength, in trust, and in heart." The city below shimmered, the first light of dawn brushing the horizon. Shadows still lingered, and challenges would come again, but for now there was peace. And in that peace, Lady Seraphine and Lord Kale found something rare and precious. A bond forged in darkness, tempered by trials and strengthened by mutual respect and trust. The Shadow Hall stood silent, a witness to their triumph, a reminder of the dangers they had overcome. The curse, once a threat that had haunted Seraphine's every step, was now part of her, a source of power, strength, and transformation. And as the first rays of sunlight broke over Eldrin, Seraphine knew the truth. The city would always hold shadows, but she no longer feared them. She had faced darkness, embraced it, and emerged stronger than ever. Kale stood beside her, silent and watchful, and she felt the quiet warmth of companionship, of trust, of connection. Together they had survived, grown, and discovered a power that went beyond magic, the power of courage, love, and the heart brings. And somewhere in the distant streets of Eldrin a faint presence lingered, watching, perhaps waiting. But Seraphine no longer trembled. She had faced the curse, faced the shadows, faced the dangers of the city. And she had emerged stronger. The story was not over. Challenges would come. Shadows would rise. But she knew one thing for certain. She would not face them alone. Kale's hand found hers once more. "We face it together," he said quietly. Seraphine squeezed his hand. A quiet promise. "Together," she whispered. The city of Eldrin breathed around them, alive with secrets and shadows. Yet for the first time, Seraphine felt the full measure of freedom. Not just from the curse, but from fear, doubt, and isolation. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor. And in that survival she had found courage, trust, and perhaps even love.